You have likely told yourself, in quiet moments, that you are stronger than most. Not aloud, perhaps, but in the small, secret places of the mind where we measure our worth against the world. It is an easy belief to carry when life is gentle, when the winds are low and the road beneath your feet is smooth enough to forget how fragile your footing truly is. But strength, if it is to mean anything at all, cannot be proven in comfort. It waits, patiently, almost indifferently, for the hour when something you have long avoided steps into your path and refuses to move. And in that moment, the question is no longer what you have claimed about yourself, but what remains when excuses fall silent, and there is nowhere left to turn except toward the very thing you hoped would never demand your courage. There is a peculiar kind of strength that thrives in ease, a quiet confidence that grows when nothing in your world is sharp enough to challenge it. It is the sort of strength that feels convincing, even noble, precisely because it has never been asked to prove itself. When life offers you predictable days and manageable burdens, you begin to carry yourself as though you have already endured something great. You mistake the absence of difficulty for the presence of resilience, and in doing so, you build a version of yourself that exists only under the most favorable conditions. Comfort has a way of wrapping itself around your thoughts, softening every edge until even your doubts seem gentle. It persuades you that you are prepared simply because you feel steady, that you are disciplined because nothing has truly tested your limits. You begin to trust this feeling, not realizing it is built on circumstances rather than character. The ground beneath you appears firm, but only because it has not yet been shaken. And so, without noticing, you begin to define your strength by how little resistance you encounter, rather than how well you endure it. In such a state, it is easy to look at others who struggle and believe you would do better in their place. You imagine yourself standing firm where they faltered, speaking boldly where they hesitated, enduring patiently where they broke. But these imaginings are shaped in a world where the stakes are distant and the pain is theoretical. They cost you nothing, and because they cost you nothing, they allow you to feel strong without ever demanding that you become so. What comfort conceals is not merely your weakness, but your untested self. It hides the parts of you that have never been forced into the light, the fears you have quietly stepped around, the limits you have never had to confront. You begin to believe that because you have not failed, you are incapable of failing, when in truth you have simply not yet been placed where failure is possible. There is a difference, and it is a difference that comfort works tirelessly to obscure. The illusion becomes most dangerous when it settles into certainty. You no longer question your strength because there has been no reason to. You no longer examine your habits because they have not yet betrayed you. You move through life with a quiet assurance, unaware that it rests on conditions that could change without warning. And when they do, when something enters your life that does not bend to your preferences or retreat from your discomfort, the strength you believed you possessed begins to feel strangely absent. It is not that you were entirely without strength, but that what you had was incomplete, shaped by ease rather than resistance. Comfort had allowed you to rehearse the idea of being strong without ever stepping into the reality of it. And so, when the moment comes that demands more than feeling steady, more than appearing composed, more than believing in yourself without evidence, you find that the version of strength you carried was never meant for such weight. Avoidance seldom announces itself as a flaw. It prefers quieter disguises, reason, timing, even a certain kind of prudence that appears thoughtful on the surface. You tell yourself you are waiting for the right moment, that you will face what unsettles you when you are better prepared, less tired, more certain. And for a while, this seems sensible. After all, not every battle must be fought at once. But there is a difference between choosing your moment and quietly surrendering it, and avoidance is skilled at blurring the line between the two. What you postpone does not disappear, it settles into the background of your life, growing familiar in a way that makes it seem less urgent than it truly is. You learn to move around it, to adjust your routines so that you seldom have to confront it directly. In time, this adjustment feels natural. You forget that your path has been altered at all, and what was once a deliberate act of stepping aside becomes an unconscious habit of retreat. It is here that avoidance begins its quiet work, not by overwhelming you, but by subtly reshaping the way you live. Each time you turn away from something that requires courage, a small opportunity is lost, not only the chance to overcome the thing itself, but the chance to strengthen the part of you that would have faced it. Strength is not formed in abstraction. It grows through use, through the repeated act of meeting resistance and discovering that you can endure more than you expected. When you avoid, you deny yourself these encounters. You preserve your comfort, but at the cost of your development, trading the possibility of growth for the certainty of ease. Over time, this trade begins to show its effects. You may still carry the appearance of confidence, still speak as though you are capable, but there is a quiet hesitation beneath it, a sense that there are areas of your life where your footing is uncertain. These are the places shaped by avoidance, the corners you have left unexplored, the challenges you have chosen not to meet. They remain not as loud and obvious obstacles, but as subtle limitations that influence your decisions without announcing themselves. What makes this weakening so difficult to recognize is that it does not feel like weakness in the moment. It feels like relief. Each act of avoidance spares you discomfort, and that relief can be mistaken for wisdom. You begin to believe that you are navigating life efficiently, avoiding unnecessary struggle, when in truth you are quietly narrowing the range of what you are able to face. Your world becomes smaller, not always in visible ways, but in the silent boundaries you place around yourself. And when something arises that cannot be avoided, something that demands your attention and refuses to be postponed, you encounter not only the challenge itself, but the accumulated effect of all the moments you chose not to prepare for it. The strength that might have been built gradually, through smaller acts of courage, is absent, and you are left to face a greater weight with fewer resources than you might have had. In this way, avoidance does not merely delay difficulty, it amplifies it, ensuring that when it finally comes, it arrives with a force that feels disproportionate to the moment, though it has been gathering quietly all along. There is a common assumption that the great trials of life will arrive with warning, that they will give some signal of their approach, allowing you time to gather yourself, to arrange your thoughts, to become the person you believe you must be in order to meet them. It is a comforting idea, this belief that difficulty will respect your readiness, that it will wait politely until you feel prepared. But life does not concern itself with such arrangements. The moments that matter most have a habit of appearing without ceremony, entering your path when you are occupied with other things, when your attention is divided, when your sense of control is at its most fragile. You may imagine yourself steady in crisis, composed in the face of uncertainty, certain of your choices when everything is at stake. Yet these imaginings are formed in stillness, where the mind is free to construct ideal responses without the pressure of consequence. In reality, when the unexpected arrives, it rarely grants you the clarity you assumed you would possess. It brings confusion, urgency, and a narrowing of your options, so that what once seemed like a range of possible actions becomes a single, unavoidable decision that must be made before you have fully understood it. It is in these moments that you encounter not the person you intended to be, but the person you have quietly become. There is no time to assemble new habits or summon a courage you have not practiced. You act from what is already within you, from the patterns you have formed in less significant moments, from the choices you have made when the stakes were small enough to ignore. The uninvited nature of these tests reveals something unsettling, that preparation is not something you can gather at the last moment, but something that has been accumulating, or failing to accumulate, long before the need for it was apparent. What makes such tests particularly difficult is not only their suddenness, but their indifference to your circumstances. They do not adjust themselves to suit your mood or your readiness. They do not consider whether you have had enough time, whether you feel strong enough, whether you would prefer to face them later. They arrive as they are, demanding a response that cannot be postponed without consequence. And in doing so, they strip away the illusion that you are in control of when and how your strength will be measured. There is also a certain quiet honesty in the way these moments present themselves. Because they are unannounced, they leave little room for performance. You are not acting for an audience, nor are you guided by the expectations you might otherwise try to meet. Instead, you are confronted with a situation that requires something genuine, something drawn from the core of who you are rather than the image you have maintained. This can be unsettling, for it reveals not only your capacities, but also your limitations, the areas where you are less certain, less steady, less prepared than you believed. And so, when life tests you in this way, it does not merely challenge your strength, it exposes the extent to which that strength has been lived rather than imagined. The absence of warning, the lack of preparation, the immediacy of the demand, all these serve to remove the distance between who you think you are and who you are in practice, leaving you to stand within that difference without the comfort of adjustment. Fear has a curious way of presenting itself as something external, as though it were merely a reaction to circumstances, rather than a reflection of something already present within you. You speak of fearing failure, rejection, uncertainty, as if these were separate from you, as if they arrived from the outside and imposed themselves upon an otherwise steady mind. Yet, if one were to look more closely, it becomes apparent that fear does not create nearly as much as it reveals. It brings into view what has been quietly forming beneath the surface, what has gone unexamined, what has been carefully avoided. In moments of ease, you are able to maintain a certain image of yourself, one that is consistent and reassuring. You believe yourself to be capable, composed, perhaps even courageous, because nothing has required you to question these assumptions too deeply. But when fear enters, it disrupts this stability. It introduces a tension that cannot be ignored, a discomfort that insists on being acknowledged. And in that insistence, it begins to uncover the places where your confidence was never as secure as you believed. What you fear often points, with surprising accuracy, to the very areas you have chosen not to confront. It may be a conversation you have delayed, a decision you have postponed, a risk you have refused to take. These are not random sources of anxiety. They are connected to something specific within you, something that remains unresolved. Fear draws a line toward these hidden places, not to torment you without purpose, but to make visible what you have kept out of sight. It is less an enemy than an unwelcome guide, leading you toward truths you would prefer to leave undiscovered. There is a tendency to respond to fear by retreating, by seeking distance from whatever has stirred it. This response feels natural, even necessary, for fear is rarely pleasant. It unsettles your thoughts, disrupts your sense of control, and introduces doubts that are difficult to silence. Avoiding it offers immediate relief, a return to familiarity and comfort. But in doing so, you also turn away from the very insight fear was offering. You preserve your ease, but at the cost of understanding yourself more fully. If, however, you resist the impulse to withdraw, if you allow yourself to remain in the presence of fear long enough to examine it, something different begins to emerge. The intensity of it may not lessen at once, but its nature becomes clearer. You begin to see that it is not an indistinct force, but something with shape and direction. It points toward specific thoughts, specific memories, specific beliefs about yourself that have not been tested or challenged. And in recognizing this, you are given an opportunity, not to eliminate fear entirely, but to engage with what it is trying to show you. This engagement requires a certain honesty, a willingness to admit that the discomfort you feel is connected to something within your control, rather than something imposed entirely from without. It asks you to consider that what you have been avoiding may hold more significance than you have allowed yourself to believe. Such an admission is not easy, for it challenges the narratives you have constructed about your own strength and readiness. It suggests that there are aspects of yourself that remain uncertain, unformed, perhaps even fragile. Yet it is precisely in acknowledging these aspects that the possibility of growth appears. Fear, in revealing what you have been hiding from, offers you a choice: to continue avoiding and remain as you are, or to move toward what unsettles you and begin to understand it. The revelation itself does not change you, but it alters the conditions under which change can occur, making it increasingly difficult to pretend that what you fear has nothing to do with who you are becoming. There is a persistent belief that strength is something one possesses fully formed, as though it were a fixed quality granted in advance, waiting only for the right moment to be displayed. Under this assumption, the task is not to become strong, but to reveal the strength that is already there. Yet this belief begins to falter when one considers how rarely such strength appears without having been shaped by difficulty. What is often taken for strength is, in truth, an untested confidence, a sense of certainty that has not yet encountered enough resistance to refine it. To face something is not merely to encounter it, but to remain present with it when every instinct urges you to withdraw. It is to stand within discomfort without immediately seeking relief, to allow the weight of a situation to press upon you without turning away. This is not a dramatic act, nor does it always appear significant from the outside. It can take the form of a difficult conversation you choose not to avoid, a responsibility you accept without delay, a truth you acknowledge despite the unease it brings. In each case, the act of facing is less about overcoming in a single moment and more about refusing to escape. What makes this process essential is that it alters something within you each time it is practiced. When you face what is difficult, you begin to gather evidence, not in theory, but in experience, that you are capable of enduring more than you previously believed. This evidence is not easily shaken, for it has been earned rather than assumed. It forms a quieter, more stable kind of confidence, one that does not depend on circumstances remaining favorable, because it has already been tested in conditions that were not. Avoidance, by contrast, preserves the illusion of safety while quietly eroding this possibility. Each time you step away, you reinforce the idea that the thing you avoided was beyond you, or at least not worth the effort of confronting. This reinforcement does not remain isolated. It extends into other areas, shaping how you perceive new challenges. You become more inclined to doubt your capacity, more hesitant to engage, more willing to justify retreat. In this way, avoidance does not merely delay growth, it redirects your development toward caution rather than courage. There is also a certain misunderstanding about what it means to face something. It is often imagined as a decisive, singular act, a moment in which fear is overcome entirely and replaced with clarity and control. But in practice, it is rarely so complete. To face something may involve uncertainty, hesitation, even a lingering desire to retreat. The presence of these does not invalidate the act, rather it defines it. Strength is not the absence of such feelings, but the decision to move forward despite them, to remain engaged even when resolution is not immediate. Over time, these acts accumulate. What once seemed formidable becomes familiar, not because it has changed, but because you have. The boundaries of what you can endure begin to expand, not in sudden leaps, but through steady, repeated encounters with what you might otherwise have avoided. This expansion is subtle, often unnoticed in the moment, but its effects become evident when you find yourself responding differently to challenges that would once have unsettled you more deeply. In this way, strength emerges not as something you discover within yourself fully intact, but as something that is gradually constructed through the choices you make when faced with difficulty. Each decision to engage rather than withdraw contributes to this construction, shaping a character that is defined less by what it claims to be and more by what it has consistently done when confronted with the opportunity to turn away.